here's a fellow from Koch Industries sitting down with me, and we should sort of get our arms around that and the sort of image that the Kochs have because of their political activities and the notion that they're extraordinarily powerful in our politics right now, and spending an awful lot of money. And I know you said, and I'm sure that that's a powerful motivation. That a lot of that is a matter of principle and philosophy.
Yeah.
But they're also like you represent a huge industry in energy and manufacturing, lots of regulatory issues, and the question becomes, since we're talking about the founding fathers, did they anticipate, massive spending by interests on issues that are impactful on their own bottom line?
That's a question we could debate, I guess, for sure. I think it's a First Amendment issue. And first, let me just be clear. A lot of it, particularly Charles's money, goes to education and other things besides politics.
No, and I understand that David's philanthropy in New York is very visible there.
Let's talk about this, because you obviously are much more knowledgeable, for sure, on history and politics and everything else.
Well, I think I'm about to get fleeced here.
No, you're not. You're not. I didn't even. No. Seriously, I wasn't just saying that to, fill your boots up or whatever they say in the Midwest. But I would. But my point is, going back to the beginning, politics has always been really nasty and really expensive, in my opinion, from what I've read and understood. And I think that what we've seen over time is there's always been a ton of money in politics. There really has, on both sides, depending on who's giving it. Now, Citizens United, that is seen as some watershed event, and I get why that is said, but at its core, we know what that case is about, which is that there was a video put out by this group called Citizens United that was critical of then candidate Hillary Clinton in 2008, and because of the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, you could not have a video out within 60 days or 30 days of the general election or primary election, and so they were prohibited from putting that video out on direct for whatever it is. Excuse me. They sued, saying we have a First Amendment right to do this. The lower court said, no, you don't, and in fact, it could be criminal under McCain-Feingold. That went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, 5-4, ruled that that law is unconstitutional. You can't censor that. That's core political speech. And I think that was the holding of that case. It gets conflated and misrepresented, in my opinion. But corporations have free speech rights, First Amendment rights. I could not have been out doing what I've done the last 8, 9 months now, 10 months this year, talking about, in my capacity as Koch Industries, meeting with legislators. The only time I've ever lobbied in my life has been this year on criminal justice reform. That's First Amendment activity. So we have those rights. I think that what is lost, really, at the end of the day, is that money has been seen as speech in our political process for a long time, going back at least to Buckley versus Vallejo, where William Brennan, who was no conservative, was in the majority on that case. And so that's what we're talking about. Money is speech, and there's also anonymous speech is recognized by the First Amendment. So I see it as all consistent and part of what's been going on in this country for a long time.
I'm not as fluent in history as you suggest, or as I should be, but I do remember a period in our country in the late 19th century when it was another period of tremendous change, industrial revolution, great aggregations of wealth, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and so on, all of whom did philanthropic things and good things, but also marshaled their power very much on behalf of their industries. And Teddy Roosevelt came along. The law that the court, some of law that has been set aside are laws that Roosevelt put in place against corporate participation in our politics because of a concern that the voices of everyday people were being crowded out. Mm-hmm. So this has been a long-standing concern. Isn't it a legitimate concern? If I know we all have the right to exercise free speech, but Joe Smith down the block here, who has the same right to exercise free speech as Charles Koch, is not going to be entertaining the entire array of Republican candidates at his apartment tonight because they don't need him. They need the money that a Charles Koch can provide, and that's a concern, is it not?
Well, I don't think, going back to what I said earlier, I think this has been the case on both sides for a long time. That there,
Is it good?
yeah, I think it's
I mean,
all First Amendment. I think,
you're an advocate for, and I'm really I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's really important. You're an advocate for people who've gotten the short end of the stick, and you said earlier, and I agree with you, that it's largely because they were poor and they were disadvantaged. They didn't have. You said, people with means generally don't have to deal with the things that these people do, and
well, they can deal with it better, is what it is.
right. But then if we have a political system where people with great resources have the loudest say, doesn't that sort of crowd out the concerns of these people who you're fighting so desperately for?
No, I don't think so. I think our point of view is, again, both sides do it, and everybody has a right to free speech. We have grassroots groups like Americans for Prosperity. They get branded certain ways or targeted certain ways. Or
Tim
described
Phillips
certain
has
ways.
been here, by the way.
Tim,
who runs
I know.
Americans for Prosperity, and I look, as a political
Sure.
operative. I have to say, I'm in awe of the organizing that Americans for Prosperity has done. I think that it's been an incredible force in our politics.
See, I see this. I see that the way that some want to set up the campaign finance system is really going to be ultimately the Incumbent Protection Act forever. It's like the Udall Amendment last year, where they tried to amend the Constitution to limit the ability for certain activities to happen during electoral season. I don't think we should do that. I hear what you're saying. There's all this concern about we have an outsized voice, we have this, we have that.
Well,
I guess I disagree. We do certain things.
I'll trade places with you.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't want to trade places with anybody, but well, all I'm saying is that the things we believe in, if we were as powerful as you say and as persuasive as you say and had this control, then why, when the extenders bill last year, we had like 30 people who we supported voted against that because it was a lot of pork and a lot of cronyism. Most everybody still does the same thing. We don't have that kind of power. I'm not saying we don't have any. I think that most politicians are going to do their own thing. And at the end of the day, we try to be engaged in the political process so we can get the ideas we think are important passed through and implemented to the extent there's will for it, the political will that the elected officials have to have. But the things that we care about, like overspending, cronyism, the criminal justice system reform issues, there's a common thread. It's about individual liberty and freedom and letting individuals decide what to do with their own money, their own neighborhoods, their own lives, and less government intrusion. Government is way too intrusive, way too overreaching. So that's what we use our voice for. Now, is that good, bad, or indifferent? I don't know. I think throughout history, there's been a lot of different people have different views. And the thing I love about our country is you get to say it. You don't have to like it. But the cure for speech you either don't like or don't agree with is more speech. It's not less speech. And I think that common people do have a voice. I know the Democracy Alliance has about 182 groups, which is the counterpart to what we do.
They're not common people either.
They're not common people either, but they have a lot of groups they support that are, like MoveOn.org. Is that common people? Yeah. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying, David, is both sides do it. We maybe both complain about it. But I think it's positive to have as many viewpoints and voices out there, and there are a lot of points of views. And while we get I get enough Google alerts, I see what we get blamed for. It's the Ben Franklin thing, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see. And I think that we should be encouraging more voices, more people out there, regardless of what it is and not less. And we play a role in that, and a lot of other people and individuals do as well. And I think that's a healthy thing for our country.
I think you're unduly modest, but